Have you ever been ambushed, shot at, or struggled to survive? Well, stay tuned to meet a man who discovered God's faithfulness in the midst of the storm. My name is Yvonne Lewis Shelton, and you're watching Urban Report. Hello and welcome to Urban Report. My guest today is Pastor Paul Lowe, a man with a dynamic testimony. Welcome to Urban Report, Pastor Lowe.
Nice to be here, Sister Yvonne.
It's great to have you. You know, you were on the Parent Network on the Today program, and I think Jason interviewed you, and he said you have a tremendous testimony. So we always like to get our folks who have great testimonies on to Dare to Dream to share with our Dare to Dream viewers as well. So thank you so much for being willing to share your testimony.
Thank you for allowing me to share.
Tell us about your journey. Where were you born?
I was born in Ghana, South America.
Ah, and how did you end up here?
Well, my mom first migrated to the U.S. about 1968. I was just shy of 2 years old. That mass migration, the U.S. was seeking nurses and teachers post the Vietnam War and the Korean War. And so she was successful in obtaining a visa to come to the U.S. to serve. And about 10 years later, our visas would be approved. That was just about 1976, 1977. That would migrate to Brooklyn, New York from South America.
Wow. So what kind of difference was there for you leaving South America and coming to Brooklyn? Because I'm from New York too.
Right.
So I know there are areas of Brooklyn, there are different areas of Brooklyn, and but coming from South America to Brooklyn, what was that like?
Yeah, the humor I often share is like a transition from the tropical jungle to the concrete jungle.
Yeah.
You know, and I had a life wherein in South America, in a Christian home, grandma was a lay Adventist minister, a church planter, strong conservative fundamental type, and so the quote-unquote old-time religion was reinforced quite well when I was a child.
So you lived with your grandmother as a child?
I was raised by my grandma. Sister and I were raised by my grandma.
All right.
Beautiful jungle, coastal area. Walk across the road and I'm in the river. Go a little further, reach the Atlantic. You know, nice, beautiful setting.
Mm-hmm. Fruit trees.
All
and
the
all
fruit
that stuff.
trees and all that wonderful stuff.
it.
Hot days, cool nights.
Yes.
Yeah, just fun living. Even though it may be at a poverty level considered or in contrast to the average U.S. middle class, but never felt poor.
Isn't it amazing how when you're growing up, a lot of times you don't realize that your family might not have as much as other people. You just deal with what you have.
That is true.
You know, you don't even realize that you're poor if you're poor. Sometimes you do. I mean, it depends on, your situation. But you're saying that you didn't even realize that there was any poverty there.
No.
And I bet you the love of your grandmother, it sounds like, that was a very enveloping kind of love.
Yeah, the support. Didn't really feel it so much as a child because my grandma, as I said, was very conservative, very fundamental, very strict. Wonderful person. I expect to and strongly, I'm confident I'll see my grandma in heaven by God's grace. But that grace wasn't so easily felt at that age, you know?
Ah, okay. So then let me backtrack then. So she was a strict grandma.
Yeah.
And she wasn't that affectionate? She was more strict and
Yes,
affectionate?
we come from a matriarchal culture. Strong women, lineage of strong women, strong West African women. Grandma was no nonsense. You know, when I came to America and learned that children were, my peer, they were very fond of their grandmas, So y'all talk about your grandparent like, cookies and, grandma is a person that spoils.
Yes.
Not my grandma. So I was like, that's not the grandma I kind of knew,
Okay.
Mine believed in, spare the rod and spoil the child. So the rod wasn't being spared at all.
So you got some serious discipline.
Oh, yes.
Okay, okay.
Oh, yes.
And your sister was there with you as well? So you and your
Yes.
sister were raised by your grandmother?
Yes, yes. Uh-huh.
How did you feel about your mother not being there raising you? Your grandmother was raising you.
That was tough. That was tough, especially considering I was not always comfortable about being in that environment. My mom would visit maybe once every 3 or 4 years, as most. This is the story of your average Caribbean person of that diaspora, right? Your average Caribbean migrant. So that created that opportunity allowed to us by the U.S. It was a blessing and a curse in some sense, you could say, because it took most of the women out of the household, because as I said, they were looking for nurses and teachers primarily. So women in the thousands throughout the Caribbean in general, it wasn't just Ghana, it was Jamaica, Trinidad, Grenada, Barbados, wherever, started to relocate to the U.S. because the U.S. opened its immigration ports to receive skilled, British educated individuals who would now fill the vacancies for the women that left the home to work in the factories during the war, right? So then the U.S. was experiencing a deficit of its own civil infrastructure as it pertained to teachers and nurses. So the next best thing for them to do geographically, here's the Caribbean, and here you have this large population of British educated individuals, skilled. Yeah, they can come and they can help this nation to be a better place as we help them to better their own, life goals and so on and so forth. But what that did, it removed most of the women from our society and left the men. And that created a bit of an imbalance. So I guess my dad didn't want to or was incapable of, or for whatever reasons, he did not become our, like a single parent. Instead, we were raised by our grandma, and that's what the model that we see repeated.
Was he still in the home, your dad?
No.
Okay.
I saw my dad maybe holiday periods, Christmas time, or I would also visit the city to visit my dad's mom. That is she was an East Indian mixed lady, so to differentiate between the two, I would say my black mom and my East Indian grandma. And so I would visit her in the city at times, and I would see him at times there, but didn't really know my dad until I was about age 15, interactively.
It's interesting to me, like I know of a lot of situations where women have left the children in the islands and they've come to the States to work, and they send money back home
Yes.
to the kids, but they are separated from the children.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that this was really a cultural phenomenon in the islands. I hadn't put that together. That's interesting. So in essence, you lost your mom and your dad.
In essence. I actually remember one of my mom's visit was very interesting because we traveled to the airport in the city and waiting for my mom to embark, get off the aircraft and so on and so forth. And I don't know what she looks like. I don't really know who I'm looking for, But I'm standing there with this sense of excitement and intrigue. I'm going to see my mom today. And a lady comes up to me and just kisses me on my forehead and says, Paulo, as she would call me. And, I kind of looked bewildered, looked up at her. And she said, I'm your mom, And then I said, Mommy, And she just burst out in tears because she realized I didn't recognize her immediately.
Yes.
But of course, immediate bonding. And I'm happy for 3 or 4 days, and then she's gone.
And so at what point were you reunited with your mom?
1977, January 1977, I was 10 years old. And our visas finally came through in 1976, and then we migrated to Brooklyn. And my mom is living in East Flatbush, Brooklyn. We're living in a 1-bedroom apartment. Mom was working 4 jobs when we came to the U.S. to make ends meet. And in addition to that, she was in school. So she started out, I think her efforts initially was to pursue, as I said, tap the civil infrastructure as a teacher. But my mom was an introvert, and she was a very quiet person. And the Brooklyn, New York school system, no, she couldn't handle that.
Yes,
She couldn't handle
yes.
that. So I think she quickly focused on nursing because I had an aunt who was already here from earlier in the 60s that was a professional nurse, had by then been an RN. And so my mother decided to pursue that study. But she would work. She had one job where she worked during the day, I believe, as a caretaker for a family. Then she had another job in the evening at it's kind of like a sweatshop, a place that made clothing. Then she had another job on the weekend, you know. And so I would see my mom sometimes maybe 3 or 4 times for the week. We were both latchkey kids at that time. Wake up in the morning, 6:30, 7 o'clock, breakfast is on the table, a bowl of cereal, some milk, you know, toast, whatever have you. Sister and I would have our breakfast and then we'd leave for school. They're at school for the day, come home in the afternoon, sit down, do my homework or whatever it is, you know, and I'd be out on the street, you know. Come inside by whatever time my mom said, try to be inside, whether that was 8 p.m., 9 p.m., whatever. And my sister and I take food out the refrigerator, you know, before my sister started cooking also. We would eat, and then we go to bed. And I would recall at times, briefly, feel the cold fingers on my neck and my face, a kiss on my forehead, open my eyes, look up, and that would be about 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., my mom just getting in from work. And then I slept in the living room on a pull-out bed. My mom would go to bed, and then my mom would be gone by maybe 5 a.m., 6 a.m. And so when I would wake up, I wouldn't see her, except maybe on the weekends, if it was a weekend that she was at home. This is before she became an Adventist.
I was just getting ready to ask, was she an Adventist or a church goer?
Yeah, she later became an Adventist. She was always a God-fearing person, but at the time we relocated to the U.S., my mom was not church-going. She was just work-going.
Right, right,
and study-going.
And I'm sitting here listening to you, and I know that there are so many children who are latchkey kids, who, because their parents, usually it's a single mom in many cases, they have to make ends meet. So they work all these jobs, but then in the meantime, the children are left without a parent.
Yeah.
So essentially, you and your sister were kind of raising yourselves because she wasn't, she wasn't there because she couldn't be there because she had all those jobs.
Right.
And it's a catch-22, I guess, because you have to stay afloat. So
yes.
So what did you get into as a result? Because you're 10. You came over here at 10. You came from being totally supervised by grandma to having essentially no supervision. Your sister older or younger?
Sister was older, is older.
Older. So was she kind of babysitting you, or were you kind of on your own?
Yeah, not really. We both, let's take the good and the bad. That nurture from my grandma that, as I said, was not pleasant at the time, it really was beneficial because my grandma helped us both to be very independent at an early age. My sister knew how to cook, wash clothing, I knew how to cook basic things, you know? But then, as I said, you still have the matriarchal culture and a culture that's kind of let men get away with stuff. So I didn't have to be as concerned about cooking and all of that at that time. But I had the skills, you know? I'm a great cook today.
All right, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So 10 years old, you guys are basically your latchkey kids and doing your homework, but you're also out at night.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
What did you get into?
Yeah. I'm making friends. Before I even started attending school, we got here in the middle of a real bad blizzard, the blizzard of 77.
Oh, from the tropics to a blizzard.
Right smack into that
my
blizzard.
Word.
And so it took about a month and a half before I was actually in school because that delayed the whole process. So I had a lot of time to look out the window. Many of the days we were just there. Now, my mom, she did caution us well. She said, do not go outside. Do not open the door. Do not this, do not, you know, so on and so forth. We knew all the rules. And so I would look out the window. The window was to a back alley because we were in the rear of that apartment complex. But I would see stuff just looking out the back alley. I could see through the alley to another street. I'd see fights. you know, every afternoon the kids are coming home from school. I saw the unfortunate incident of a young lady being sexually assaulted right below our living room window in that back alley,
no.
at 10 years old. You know, and I'm learning the harsh realities of what that environment is like. So I'm kind of preparing myself. Then I start school finally, and I'm making friends. I'm bonding with peers, with other children of Caribbean background, because teacher could not understand me, and I could barely understand some of the other students and the teachers. So I had a friend. He was from Jamaica, and he became my good buddy in my translator. He'd tell the teacher what I said, and he would explain to me what the teacher was saying, because I couldn't clearly understand, you know, to the best of my ability. And I do remember one day, even though we came in a blizzard, as I said, deep snow and all of that, I had never really seen snow fall.
Okay.
I came when there was snow on the ground. Okay, so then one day the teacher says to me, Paul, just calls me randomly, yes, sir, as I would, you know, say, yes, sir. And he said, have you ever seen snow falling? I said, no. And he says, look out the window. And I turn and I see oh, you know, like what I saw was the little ornaments that we had.
Yes,
You shake it up,
right,
the
the
water in the
paperweights.
middle. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, these little globe things.
Yeah.
You know, you would see snow falling in there. I ran to the window. I was so fascinated, and I actually lifted the window up. Teacher's like, no, close the window. So, you know, it was this culture shock, all this culture shock and fascination, and then the other is the general challenge of dealing with violence. You know, kids are fighting every day, you know. The whole psychology of survival was so prevalent, and you had to master it at this very early age.
Let's talk about it, because one of the things that I see in our urban centers like New York and Chicago, I mean, children are really in battle zones. You don't even know if you're going to be able to go from home to school and back without being confronted by some kind of violence. That's not normal.
Yeah.
It's the norm
Yeah.
in that environment, but it's not normal. You can't, we're asking our children to do things that we train soldiers to do.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, it's just, so how did you, let's talk about what was going on in that neighborhood and what you had to do to survive.
Yeah. We're talking East Flatbush, Brooklyn, Clarkson, 52nd Street, Rutland. People who are familiar with Brooklyn, Remsen Avenue, that whole basin right there. And as I said, starting out really wasn't that bad. Friends are looking out for me. Now, one thing different, I had not as yet been able to register for school lunch. You know, the school provides lunch.
Right.
That's a process, so we weren't cleared for that yet. So I would walk home for lunch. First casualty, if I would say, first incident. I get out and kids stay at school for lunch. I have permission to go home for lunch, and I leave. Now, my mom, as I mentioned, she worked for a wealthy family, one of her jobs, working for a wealthy family. This family was kind enough, family in Long Island, when they learned that we were migrating, and they're like, we're going to help you get things ready for you and your kids. So they bought winter clothing for my sister and I. And I guess because this family was well off, they bought a good quality coat. But at that time, I know nothing about status symbols and you know, this kind of stuff. So they buy, well-meaning, a corduroy coat that was called a quarterfield, right? This was a coat that was made of corduroy and mink. The collar was mink, the coat was corduroy.
In the hood.
And the body of the coat had down filling. So I'm 10 years old. So I have this nice, for me, it's just a coat.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
right.
It's just a coat. It was this green quarterfield coat, I remember, with the brown mink collar and all of that. So one day, just walking home, you know, actually, the friend that used to translate for me, the first day I wore the coat to class, came into class and was, yo, whoa, man, yo. You know, the kids are like, yo, that's you? You know, I don't know what they're talking about.
You're
like,
wearing that coat in the hood.
Yeah, what you mean that's me? Yo, that's you? I'm like, yeah, whatever, man, you know, go sit down.
Yeah.
And then the friend said to me, he leaned over and he said, yo, you strapped? I didn't even know what that meant.
Right.
I'm like, what? So you strapping?
That makes you want to, like, do I have a belt on? or
Yeah.
what?
I'm like, what you mean I'm strapping? He said, yo, you got a gun? You got a knife? I'm like, nah, 5th grade. This is 5th grade.
5th grade, and asking you, do you have a
That's
weapon?
right. And he said to me, he then said, yo, I hope you know how to throw your hands. I hope you know how to fight, shorty, as they
Yeah.
nicknamed me.
Yeah.
And I thought nothing of it. So I'm walking home, and I pass 3 guys leaning up on a car, smoking, smoking weed, reefer as we call it back
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
You can smell it.
And how old are they? Are they older?
They're
Are they
teenagers. Yeah,
Okay.
they're the youngest, maybe 16. So these are guys from the high school that come in, or junior high school that come and hang out. And so one guy kind of steps off. He says, yo, shorty, come here. Just calls to me. Me? Yeah, you, come here, man. So I turn around, start walking back to the guy. Guy takes the joint out of his mouth and he said, yo, what you want to do for that coat? I don't understand what that means.
Right, right.
At that time.
Yes.
What you mean what I want to do for my coat? I said to him, I said, what do you mean what I want to do for my coat? I said, what you want to do for that coat? And that's basically saying, get ready to defend yourself because I'm going to take your possession.
See, I wouldn't have even known what that meant either. I mean, I would have been like, what do you mean, what am I going to do for that coat? It's my coat. What?
Exactly.
So what did you think he was saying to you?
I had no idea, man. But the guy didn't waste any time. The guy stepped forward and grabbed me. He grabbed onto the collar of the coat and started to pull the coat open. Now, I was quiet. I was timid. But even then, I would fight to defend myself. So I started to resist. I held on to his hands and we got into a struggle. He started to punch me in my head and my face repeatedly, trying to get me to let go of his hands, to let go of the coat. I would not. Now, the other 2 gentlemen, the 3 of them could have easily overpowered me.
Right.
But the other 2 guys, they were kind of amused by the fact that I was fighting back and that he couldn't get the coat away from me. So then they just became audience. And the 2 of us were going, and eventually we fell to the ground. And when we fell to the ground, I managed to wrestle myself away from him, got up and I started to run, and the 3 of them started to chase me. I slipped between 2 parked cars and he fell. So I got more distance. When he got up, his friends were laughing at him. I guess he's more upset now. All 3 of them are chasing me. I get about maybe a distance of 2 blocks, and I'm right on the corner of the block where I live. And by then, because I'm smaller, they caught up with me. And I just felt this heavy thump in my back, like he punched me in my back real hard to knock me to the ground. Stumbled a little, gained my balance, continued running, and when I turned around, I just saw the 3 of them standing there. They had stopped chasing me. And so I ran, walked, ran, got to my building, ran through the door, ran upstairs, of course, shaking.
Yes.
Sat there, looked through the window and all of that. I don't even think I ate. Waited about an hour and then went back to school following a different route. Get back to school and I'm late. I get back maybe half an hour late. Class is already in session. So I walk in, everybody's looking at me. The rule then, you had to put your coat in the closet. You couldn't sit in the classroom with your coat. So I forgot. I sat down. She said, Paul, can you please get up and put your coat in the closet? Yes, sir. And I stood up and started to take the coat off, and the friend behind me said, another expletive, but whoa, dude, yo, look at your coat, bro. I'm like, what happened to my coat? And he said, look at your coat. So I took the coat, laid it flat on the desk, and the coat had about a foot-long gash in the back with all the down feathers hanging out right down to the last layer, to the nylon layer. So that that I felt wasn't a punch. The guy cut me. He tried to cut me. He was basically trying to
would have stabbed you.
trying to stab me,
back.
trying to slash something out. Cut the coat completely open.
Oh my.
And I just stood there like looking at my life,
Yes.
So then.
That's why they were standing there.
Yeah. They
Looking
waiting
at
to see what happened because I don't know if he was questioning. Well, did I hit him or did I not hit him? Did I cut him or did I not cut him?
Yes.
Maybe enough damage was felt. In his frustration, I think he just slashed at me. But it reinforced this sense of you better do something to survive. You're not going to survive this place daily just, without being proactive about having a plan of action. So I'd fast forward a few years, at about, I would say I started to react to violence with violence like about age 13, age 13, 14. By that time I had stopped going to church. Woke up on my 13th birthday and told my mom, who by then was church going, became an Adventist after seeing us get baptized by Dr. Clifford Jones.
Oh, yes,
right? So
yes.
our home
Good
church
friend,
was
yes.
Brooklyn Faith. And interestingly, my sister and I were part of the original 8 members of Brooklyn Faith that met in a basement on 52nd Street at Sister Taylor's home, right? So we are charter members of Brooklyn Faith, you would say. Out of that little 8 people, you have Brooklyn Faith that exists today.
Wow.
So I tell my mom on my 13th birthday, which happened to be on a Sabbath, I'm not going to church. Mom says, why, son? It's your birthday. Better reason to give God praise. I said, you told me, I keep asking you when I'm going to be allowed to make my own choices. And you said, I'll be allowed to make my own choices when I start to become a teenager, beginning of my manhood, so to speak. Well, I'm 13, I want to go to church. That was it. I stopped going to church. Mom said, I'll see you at divine hour, as she was pulling the bedroom. I said, no, you won't. Because I had made my mind up. It's like I told my mom, all this stuff, pathfinders and walking with that uniform and walking down the street with a Bible, if you value my life, you don't understand what's going on out there. So stopped going to church. And
were you being ridiculed for being a church boy or anything like that?
Not really ridiculed, but you definitely are recognized as someone who's not ready to cope, with street life.
Soft,
okay. Whatever else, other adjectives they would put there.
Right.
So I had a baby face. Still kind of have a baby face under all of this gray hair. And I was short. But I was bold, always as a kid, never afraid to try things. So older friends in the neighborhood realized that, and then I would be the guy that would carry the pistol when we go to block parties, or if they were going to do a break-in, they're going to break into a store or something like that, or a home, I'd be the person standing outside with the pistol. If we, as I said, if it was a house party or a street party, because the police wouldn't check me if police showed up, or someone older, because I am then 14, 15, but I look like 12, 11. So, and once, things would get to the point of some need for violence, then they would find me and just start ripping my clothes apart to get the pistol. They say, give me the tool. And I give them the pistol.
Were you part of a gang, or was this?
We didn't have gangs in the official definition. It was more what we call a posse, and so the difference between a gang and a posse is a posse comes together for just like in the West, just like in old Clint Eastwood movies and so on.
Yeah.
The sheriff or whoever calls out the posse, and they come together for the purpose of getting some bad guy.
Right.
And then it's disassembled. So the neighborhood, we moved in groups called posses, and this is the Caribbean cultural vernacular.
What were you thinking spiritually? The less you went to church, where were you? Where was your head after you stopped going to church and all? Were you feeling any kind of pull?
I felt liberated initially. I felt liberated. I was always seeking. I was always seeking God. So once I stopped going to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, then I think by age 15, 16, I started to familiarize myself with Islam, and I became a 5%er.
Oh,
so the 5%er movement was very prevalent.
Very popular.
In Brooklyn. The two, if you're talking gangs, the two largest gangs was the 5%ers and Zulu Nation.
Yes.
Right, the 5%ers and Zulu Nation.
Yes.
Zulu Nation was more for the Bronx and Manhattan, and the 5%ers were more in Queens and Brooklyn. They eventually took over all the boroughs, but that's how it kind of started out. And so I became a 5%er. And when that did not satisfy my search, the Caribbean migration began to increase. More and more Caribbean people are settling in Brooklyn. the neighborhood is becoming more and more Guyanese, Jamaican, Haitian, et cetera, et cetera. And so I started to familiarize myself with my roots. I started to become Rastafarian. Started to twist my hair, smoke weed, and the whole dancehall culture and all that kind of stuff. So I was always searching.
Yes.
And when that did not satisfy my search, then I just started to float, started to basically worship me,
With the 5%ers, I mean, that whole idea of, they call each other God.
Correct.
Because the idea is that you are God and you are God and you are God.
Yes.
And it's
The male, we were God, the females were earth.
Oh, the females were earth.
Females were earth, and we the males, were God.
So y'all could step all over earth. Was that how it worked? Okay.
It was an Islamic cult.
So the 5%ers are an offshoot of Islam?
It's actually an offshoot of the Nation of Islam.
I didn't know
which is an offshoot of Islam.
Okay.
So and the 5%ers were actually Louis Farrakhan had a lot to do with the starting of it. He wasn't the person that started, but he had a lot to do with its embryonic stage. And they were the militant right arm of the Nation of Islam. And the 5%ers believe that form of black supremacy, but also black survival. And that we should do everything that we can do to protect our families and ourselves. There were some positive virtues, but then the whole hate of every other group and the violence, react with everything was addressed, responded to or addressed with great violence. So
isn't it interesting how Satan, he can mix some good, give you a little bit of ethnic pride so that you feel comfortable with who you are, but it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
It goes into superiority. It goes into hatred. He can take you. To me, there's nothing wrong with feeling comfortable. In fact, you should be comfortable with who you are, whether you're black, white, whatever you are. Be comfortable in your own skin. But he wants to take you further than that and have you despise people who aren't the same as you.
Absolutely.
And so it's very interesting how, and we talk about this on Dare to Dream a lot and on Urban Report, how Satan's plan is to just take you in this downward spiral until you're destroyed. Your character, everything is just destroyed. But God wants to give you the abundant life.
Yes.
So as you were doing all this searching, each thing, the 5%ers, Islam, all that, none of it was giving you what you needed to get. Where were you?
Correct. I still didn't have the sense of security that I was seeking in terms of who is God, why am I here, what is my purpose. And what I want to share with you is or anyone listening is God's faithfulness.
Yes.
Because starting out all of this, God did start a good work, if I can say, even through my grandma. And even through the suffering that I experienced in home, in the nurture or the rearing of my grandma, Christ was there. He showed up a lot. I met Christ at a very early age as a child, outside of religious or indoctrination. Because, as I said, I was always seeking. Based on the hurt and the pain and the suffering that I was experiencing as a child. So now, one day I was looking through some stuff, maybe 10 years ago, and I found a license, one of my driver's license from New York. And, initially I was just going, it serves no purpose anymore, so I was going to throw it away. Then I said, you know what? I stared at that license, and I said, man, this is what I used to be. This is actually what I used to look like.
Were you high? Because you look a little high on
the morning I was.
Picture.
The morning I was, because it was customary. Early in the morning, we'd be on the street corner, we drink, we smoke before we go into class. And so that morning, now I wasn't in high school then, I'd finished high school, but still in the same surroundings.
Right.
And so I contrast that license to my passport picture, which really gives an image of how I looked as a child, this sweet, innocent, tender, trustworthy, harmless, da-da-da-da-da. So God remained faithful through all of that. And as you were saying, the devil pulls you as deep as he can until you're like at a point of no recovery.
Yes.
And then when you yourself realize that you don't even want to be recovered, you know, you just feel that down here is where you belong. You know, I've messed up so much, I've wronged so much, I've done so much that is wrong. Surely God can't love me after this. People can't love me and God can't love me. You know, and through all of that, God would reveal himself repeatedly, reminding me in some way or another that he did.
Give us an example.
Yeah, I tell folks some of my greatest prayers, and I pray today and I pray earnestly. But I gotta confess, some of my most earnest prayers occurred when I really didn't have that abiding faith, so to speak. And they were often in the middle of shootouts. I was involved in more shootouts than I can share with you. So people would say something like, so tell me about something miraculous that happened. I can't, it's too many. We'd be here until I don't know when. There's so many miracles that I experienced. But I do recall, you know, cowling, putting myself in a fetal position, and hearing the bullets, you know, getting louder and louder, closer and closer. In this one incident in a club. And when the smoke cleared, so to speak, the friend right next to me was hit. I had the debris from his tissue stuck on my clothing, in my hair. You know, I came home with my clothes spotted with his blood. And incidents like that over and over, you know, where I'm praying, God, please get me out of this situation. And if you do, I will. You're making all these quid pro quo contracts with God, as some of us do.
Yes.
And of course, I broke them as soon as I got out of that place, and I was, you know, well on my feet again, you know, it was back the same. I also had a lot of close calls as far as accidents. I rode motorcycles, you know, that loved riding racing bikes, you know, Ninjas and Honda CBRs and Hurricanes and all these real fast, powerful street bikes that we rode back then and raced on the street. And I had accidents. I drag race also for recreation, cars. And you know, these popular venues, we would go block off the street, they'd steal cars. And then because the car is stolen, you don't really care what you do with it. You know, so you go race all out for title or for money or for whatever have you. And I had accidents racing, but I always ended up being able to walk away from a lot of those incidents and a lot of those challenges.
And did you recognize at that point that, hey, why is it that I'm the one that's still surviving? Why is it that I'm the one that's walking away from these accidents? Did you realize that God must have a plan?
Yes.
There's something else going on here.
You know, Yvonne, today I rejoice in every miracle that God did, but it was also bittersweet because there were times that I lost friends that clearly, if we're measuring by virtue and integrity and so forth, quote unquote, a good person, they were a much better person than I. And I question often at their funeral, looking down in that casket, God, why him? You know, because some of those friends that I lost, they were, you know, be careful how you look at street kids, you know, because we're all wearing the same uniform. And of course, this is the general challenge for law enforcement also. We're all wearing the same uniform. And so it's easy to look and say, that one is an absolute such and such. But there are some kids who are in the uniform, but their heart, real good.
Right.
They really don't have a violent spirit.
Right.
They don't steal, they don't rob, they don't do any of that stuff, but they look just like all of their peer that are doing or are involved in some degree of deviance or whatever have you. And some of those friends got caught up and they became victims for whatever reason. I will only know when I get to heaven, you know, why God allowed them and not me. So for some time it troubled, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for all those incidents that I did survive. But yeah, you know.
So how did God finally reach you? What happened? What was the pivotal event that turned your life around?
I would say finally I had matured. I got off the street, and I never was the kind. I never had an interest in standing on a street corner with a loaded 9mm selling marijuana or coke. That just wasn't me. Though I got involved indirectly in that type of lifestyle also. But I found myself mixed up more in I don't know how to say it, like white collar stuff, you know, and stuff, illicit practice that didn't have me directly involved in face-to-face conflict, right? And dealing as a middle person, often connecting two people for something that needed to be done, and then I get a cut and this kind of stuff and all of that, right? So I started a career in aviation. Back up a little bit. I was involved in a shooting at one point, led to the death of a person. I did not kill the person, but I was a primary suspect. Person killed a friend of mine, and we were retaliating, and then that person was lost in that incident. And so the police were questioning me, and the friends of the individual that died wanted to kill me. And so my mom got together, you know, auntie this, uncle that, cousin that, typical Caribbean practice. This person put $5, this person put 10, 20, 100, whatever have you. They bought a ticket, like within 3 days. They told me I was going to Florida for a funeral because a relative had died. When I got to Kennedy Airport, and I was questioning why my cousin, my older cousin and one of my mom's friends, had to travel in the cab, sandwiching me in the middle. Get out there, and we're at the ticket counter, and I see my mom take out my passport. Why you have my passport? Just going to Florida. Son, you're not going to Florida. You're going back to Guyana. Put me on a plane, sent me back to South America.
She got you out of there before they killed you.
Right, so I was in South America for almost a year. And while
With your grandmother?
She had already passed.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm there and I'm just living the life. I'm actually in practice. I'm doing worse than I was doing in Brooklyn.
Oh my word! Because you're bringing those values. Back
the whole
into
U.S. culture.
Yes,
and in terms of intoxication and other stuff, you know, I'm not doing well. Got Rastafarian cousins, and I'm doing what Rastafarians do.
Rastas,
right?
yeah.
In the morning, smoking and all this kind of stuff. And but something happened that did help me to have a different focus. While I was there, because I had a cousin who one day in conversation just started pouring her heart out to me. And she was saying, like, I said, why are you crying? And she said, if I could only have the opportunity that you have had to go to the U.S., because she was brilliant. She had 3 scholarships, one to Russia, I think, one to Romania, and maybe China, somewhere else, I think, to study law. And she didn't see it as any value. And she wanted to come to the U.S. and study. And so she was depressed. She said, my life, I'm sick of people telling me how smart I am while I'm sitting here in this nation that's pseudo-communist, and I have no future, you know, and so on and so forth. And I listening, and I said, wow, here I am, and my concern right now, when I get back to Brooklyn, is where I'm going to find bullets. Because a gun without bullets serves no purpose. Or where I'm going to find a bigger gun. And for a while, I used to sell guns. So that was one of the things that I started to do. So
in Guyana?
No,
Oh,
in Brooklyn.
in the States.
Brooklyn. So I'm sitting there and I'm scheming, as we would say. When I get back to New York, what I could find as the most lucrative, deviant, safe practice. I try to put those 3 together.
Right. Don't want to be too out there, but yet you want a lot of money. Yeah.
And I want to live.
And you want to live.
Yeah,
right.
I want to survive.
And you don't want to go to jail.
There you go. All of the above, right? And that's my priority. I'm saying, this is what I'm thinking about. And this is what I'm doing with the opportunity that I've had to be in this nation and with my mom and make something of mine. That started my transition. So I returned, I'm motivated. I was a bright kid. I would go to school. My last 2 years, I was hardly in school. I would only go to take the state exams. And then often I would hang out with friends in the park, and they would rob other kids, and we'd smoke and drink and all of this and do silly things. And then I had an accident and broke my leg, and I was out of school for the last year for a while. And so, but I managed to get into college, and my first degree I received was in aeronautical engineering. Couldn't find work in that field because I wasn't a citizen at the time. So I went back to school after interviewing with Grumman and McDonnell Douglas and Fairchild and Boeing, these other companies can't get hired. Returned and received a degree in aviation management. and worked in the field of aviation for about 11 years.
Wow.
But that brought challenges also. So then I finally started to hear God's call when I was transferred. I accepted transfer from New York to Miami because of what I was involved in. So to keep myself safe, because one friend had been shot in both knees. Just caught him in the parking lot one night, put him on the ground, and shot him in both knees. And then while he was in the hospital on a bed warrant, because the police is investigating the shooting, they get warrant, raid his house, and they find money and narcotics. And so another friend flees the country and then calls and tells me, your time is limited. I'm out the country now, and I would advise you to do the same. Well, I couldn't leave the country at that time. Accepted transfer and relocated to Florida, started over. And that's where God finally started to speak to me. And I ended up befriending a gentleman who used to work at a bar. He would always invite me to church. I would always tell him no, but pray for me. And then at this one point where now I'm a manager, I'm an aviation manager, operations manager, and the stress of that job was just consuming me. I was 26, and the next youngest manager was 57.
Wow.
So, which I guess lends to how God had blessed me,
Yes.
career-wise and so on. But the job was extremely stressful.
Yeah.
All my managerial peer were on some form of substance abuse. Who wasn't sniffing cocaine, was using some kind of speed, and who wasn't doing that was an alcoholic, et cetera, et cetera. And so I literally felt myself dying from the stress and realized I needed something different. Started reaching out to my mom, opening my heart to her. My mom would pray with me on the phone. And little by little, I remember this friend's invitation. And then one day I said, listen, man, you remember you was inviting me to your church? Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Wow.
And I went, and at that time the church was having a revival. And experienced that revival and eventually gave my heart to the Lord. Now once I came into the church, you go from one extreme to the other. So now because I'm being arrested by my own guilt of all the things I did in those earlier years that I could not replace. And this is what I tell kids today when I talk to them. I said, while they're out there, I said, look, man, while you're out here and you're surviving, you probably got a plan to come back, but know this, when you come back, when you do, if you do, there are things that you cannot undo. And there are things that I still struggle with in terms of remorse and guilt. I know God has forgiven me.
Yes.
But the fact that I can't put those things back in those people's lives,
Yes.
that I may have been responsible for directly or indirectly, so it's a grave consequence. So I go from one extreme to the other. And I happened to be part of a church in South Florida that was extremely fundamental, extremely conservative. So like my grandma's environment, I got a lot of the old-time religion. I got a lot of what I need to do to be saved. I got a lot of the salvation by works, but I really yet had not met Christ.
Ah.
Right? It wasn't until years later, I had already been a pastor, maybe 6 years, I would say, until I finally stumbled upon what an abiding relationship in Christ is like,
And tell us how that has
transformed.
impacted your life.
Oh, tremendously, because then, as I said, this is about God's faithfulness. And what I never had through all of this experience, even though God remained faithful, God ransomed me, God rescued me, I didn't have this sense of assurance. It just wasn't there. And the reason why that sense of assurance wasn't there is because I was always seeing myself as the saving agent. So Christ died to save my life that I could save myself.
Wow.
And that was my formula. And that there are a lot of us still living like that as Christians.
Yes. This is so important. This is the righteousness by faith.
Absolutely.
Concept.
Absolutely.
Is it not?
The faith element. There's a quote that I can share with you.
Please.
That made a significant
Please.
difference, if I can share. And this is from W.W. Prescott is the name of the author. And I'm going to just read it to you as
And
is.
you know what? And I'd like for you to read it to
Absolutely.
our viewers, because I want them to know, you've been through a lot, And you had found the Lord, but you hadn't found this whole idea of righteousness by
Yes.
faith.
My assurance was in being a
Yes.
vegetarian.
Yes.
My assurance was in strictly observing the Sabbath.
Yes.
My assurance was understanding the prophecies of Scripture or of the church.
Yes.
Understanding the fundamental teachings of the church, dressing a certain way, you know, decorum and lifestyle.
It's what you
became my
could do,
assurance. Yeah.
not what Christ had done.
But this is what I
Yes,
learned.
let's hear it.
His confession is this: for a long time, I tried to gain the victory over sin, but I failed. I have since learned the reason. Instead of doing the part which God expects me to do and which I can do, I was trying to do God's part, which He does not expect me to do, and which I cannot do. Primarily, my part is not to win the victory, but to receive the victory which has already been won for me by Jesus Christ. My difficulty was due to this, that I did not give heed to the fact that victory is a gift, already won, and already to be bestowed upon all who are willing to receive it. I assumed the responsibility of trying to win what Christ had already won for me. This led to my failure. So when
That
I
is
learned,
rich.
when I realized that, it helped to solidify God's promise in Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans that I have for you. You know, not plans to harm you, but for an expected future. Because you see, in all that meandering, I actually thought God had forgotten about me. In all the suffering as a child, and I did not have, I painted a nice picture for you. I did not have a pleasant childhood. I'm talking age 10 backwards.
Right.
It was painful.
Yes.
And so even in that, I kind of thought God had, you know, like a deist experience. God is just distant. Yes, I believe in God, but He doesn't really care about me, you know? And so God would reveal Himself repeatedly, as I would say, throughout. He would show me in all those shootouts. I've been stabbed, been shot at, I've shot at people and all this kind of stuff. And so many, I had 2 friends die in my arms, you know? And fortunately, as far as the law, I was fortunate that I was arrested on many occasions. I was jailed, but I never faced prison. I never went to prison. So I was never detained for more than 2 days or such, you know. And all of these things, and the times when I did have a case, ended up being exonerated. And so, you know, just God's amazing grace through all of that.
Yes.
But I then began to see that God really never abandoned me, in spite of, even when, as you were saying, the devil had pulled me down to the point that I was so low that I didn't want to come back up. God still did not abandon me.
Yes.
He was still there.
Yes, He loves you relentlessly. You know,
Faithful.
He's faithful.
A faithful God.
I was reading something today in my devotional time that said, love and faithfulness equals loyalty.
Yes.
And that's who God is.
Yes.
He is love and He's faithful.
Yes.
And He wants that from us.
Yes.
To love others and to be faithful, to be loyal to Him. So you found out that you couldn't be your own God. That you couldn't save yourself.
First lesson.
You know, you can't save it. Well, a lot of times we try to be the Holy Spirit. We try to be the Holy Spirit for ourselves, for other people, telling them what to do and all that. It's one thing to share something with others. It's another to try to force them into our beliefs. And we can't convict people. The Holy Spirit does that.
That's it.
So you finally came to a place where you could say, Lord Jesus, thank you.
Yes, and now my joy is sharing that assurance with everybody else, especially youth. So, you know, I pastor in 4 congregations in Chicago, prayerfully, hopefully soon 5. And I have a lot of interaction with youth, and you know what's going on in Chicago today.
Yes. How are you addressing some of what's going on, the violence?
One youth at a time. One youth at a time. But ensuring also that our church our churches are actively involved in our communities to the best of our ability. But I want to say this: my story is duplicated 1,000 times over. In Brooklyn, in Chicago, in Miami, in LA, in any and most of our urban communities
Yes.
where we have Adventist churches,
Yes.
you will find thousands of adults out of that environment with a similar or even more dramatic testimony. And you will find children right now. And I want that single mother, you know, that single mother, that single grandma that has been raising, you know, Joey or whoever, or Paul or Tony or whatever his name is, and you're like, you know, what is up with this kid? You know, dear God, have mercy. You know, I don't know what else to do. I want that parent or that guardian to know that there is still hope. And for the youth, for that kid, I want you to know, no matter how far you think you have gone, God, you are not beyond God's reach.
Yes.
You're not beyond his reach. He
Yes.
can still reach you. He still loves you. He is still faithful to his call to save you, you know. So we shouldn't be ignorant that there are other youth in our church environments that are struggling with the same thing. I knew many of them. So basically, I was this kid that had two lifestyles, right? I had the Adventist lifestyle, and then I had my street lifestyle, until it got to the point where my own righteous indignation, my own sense of pride said, I can't continue doing both. And I pulled myself out of the church, you know. But we have to pray for our kids, because some of them, in my case, I felt I didn't have a choice. And I know many of them, it's a quest for survival. It's not that they're bad.
That's right.
It's not that they're evil. It's not that they want to
right.
gang bang and all this kind of stuff. It's what they see as a choice they have to make to survive. Right. So we have to help them to have that assurance, for them to understand who they are in Christ.
Yes.
For them to understand that God is faithful, that he does have a plan, and he does have a plan for them to prosper. Just as he's helping me to prosper today. Praise God.
Praise the Lord. This is such a beautiful testimony, because you can work with these young people because you've been there.
Yeah.
You understand what it's like to go through those streets every day just to go to school.
Just to go to school.
Just to go to school. I mean, my heart just aches for our young people in the inner city, because I know it's just so difficult. But thank you so much.
God is amazing.
Thank you so much
sis.
for being with us, and for being so transparent and sharing your journey.
Thank you. God bless.
And I wish you well with your churches and your congregations and your young people. And just know that, you know, our viewers will pray for you.
Thank you. God bless you.
Yes, God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us. I can't believe we've reached the end of another program. We appreciate you, and we love you, and we know that God's got a plan for you. Tune in next time, because it just wouldn't be the same without you.